Imagine stepping into an abandoned hospital. The smell of stale waste and decay filling your nostrils. The walls are covered in graffiti. The windows shattered and the floor littered with debris. What would it be like if this place was once a mental hospital? How would you feel knowing that these four walls once held some of the most tormented souls in history? You'd probably be glad to get out as fast as you could, right? Well, these aren't just any abandoned mental hospitals. They're among the largest and scariest of their kind. Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, and today we're counting down the top 10 most terrifying abandoned asylums you should never visit. Number 10, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Located in Weston, West Virginia, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum is one of the largest brick buildings in the world. Upon its opening in 1858, the 224-bed facility was designed to house patients who suffered from mental illness and other disabilities, but overcrowding soon became a problem, forcing the staff to cram patients into dormitory-style rooms with limited access to medical care. Abuse of patients was rampant and included forced labor, restraints, lobotomies, without proper anesthetic, and experimental treatments like insulin shock therapy. One particularly disturbing story comes from a former employee who described how patients were kept in straitjackets for up to a year, left to sit in their own waste, and were fed through tubes. But it wasn't just the patients who suffered. During the flu pandemic of 1918, healthy employees were sent to work at the asylum only to become infected, and many dying before being replaced by even more inexperienced workers. By 1994, the hospital had been deemed unfit for purpose and was closed. Today, the building stands abandoned and is open for tours where visitors can explore the dilapidated halls and learn about the dark history of the asylum. Number 9, Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Built in 1910, Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky, was originally meant to treat tuberculosis, a disease that was killing thousands of people each year. At its peak in the 1940s, the sanatorium housed more than 3,000 patients in its sprawling 79-acre complex. But with the advent of antibiotics in the 1950s, TB cases began to decline, and the sanatorium's population dwindled. That led to budget cuts and a decrease in staff, which resulted in unsanitary conditions and a lack of medical care. Many patients died during this time due to neglect, and those who survived were often left with severe disabilities. In 1961, the sanatorium was converted to a mental hospital, but it didn't last long. By 1982, it was empty, and the 500,000 square foot building has been abandoned ever since. No. 8. Retreat for the Sick and Insane. Established in 1847 in North Carolina, the Retreat for the Sick and Insane was one of the first mental hospitals in the United States. Originally called the North Carolina State Hospital for the Insane, the hospital quickly gained a reputation for its inhumane treatment of patients. Doctors performed cruel experiments on patients without their consent, such as injecting them with ice water to see what would happen. Many patients died as a result of the experiments or were simply neglected and left to wander the grounds. One patient, Mary Reynolds, was committed to the hospital in 1909 and died 40 years later, in 1949. She was found wandering the halls with dirt on her clothes and hair, and she could unspeak or recognize anyone. The hospital continued to operate until 1993, when it was finally closed due to budget cuts and the rising costs of providing care. Since then, the hospital has stood empty, its decaying buildings a testament to the horrors that took place within its walls. Number 7. Gads Hill Sanatorium. Gads Hill Sanatorium opened in 1907 in Waterbury, Connecticut, with the goal of providing state-of-the-art treatment for tuberculosis patients. The hospital was modern for its time and featured spacious rooms and cutting-edge technology. However, it wasn't long before the sanatorium's dark side emerged. Overcrowding and understaffing became major problems, and patients were often left to fend for themselves. The hospital's reputation for mistreating patients grew, and by the 1950s, it was clear that the sanatorium needed to change. In 1963, the sanatorium closed, and the building was converted into a youth prison. But this new use didn't last long, as the prison was shut down just a few years later due to overcrowding and violence among inmates. Today, the former sanatorium stands abandoned, a sad reminder of a time when tuberculosis was a major health threat in the United States. Number 6. Danvers State Hospital. The Danvers State Hospital in Massachusetts was a mental institution that operated from 1874 to 1994. It had a long and troubled history, marked by overcrowding, understaffing, and horrific patient abuse. One of the most notorious aspects of Danvers State Hospital was its use of lobotomy as a form of treatment. Lobotomies were a procedure that was developed in the 1930s and involved severing connections in the brain. While the procedure was sometimes successful in calming agitated patients, it was often performed without proper medical oversight or consent from family members. This led to the deaths of several patients, including one woman who died after being lobotomized 3 times. The hospital also faced criticism for its inhumane treatment of patients, including the use of physical and chemical restraints, forced labor, and denial of basic medical care. In 1994, the hospital was finally closed, and the 125-acre campus was put up for sale. No. 5. Pennhurst State School. Pennhurst State School and Hospital in Spring City, Pennsylvania, was a state institution for people with intellectual disabilities that operated from 1908 to 1987. Throughout its history, Pennhurst was plagued by allegations of patient abuse and neglect. One of the most egregious cases of abuse came to light in 1971 when a patient died after being restrained for 14 hours. An investigation revealed a culture of abuse and neglect at the institution, leading to a class action lawsuit against the state of Pennsylvania. In 1986, Pennhurst was closed and the patients were transferred to other facilities. No. Ypsilanti State Hospital. In 1842, the Michigan legislature established the Ypsilanti State Hospital, originally called the Michigan Asylum for the Insane. At the time, there was a growing need for mental health treatment in Michigan, and the asylum was designed to be a state-of-the-art facility. However, the asylum quickly became overcrowded and understaffed, leading to a decline in the quality of care. In the early 1900s, the asylum began experimenting with new treatments for mental illness, such as lobotomy, but these procedures were often performed without proper medical oversight. In 1993, the hospital was closed and the property was sold. No. 3. Athens Asylum. Athens Asylum for the Insane was a mental hospital in Athens, Georgia that operated from 1842 to 1992. Throughout its history, the asylum was plagued by overcrowding, understaffing, and allegations of patient abuse. In the early 1900s, the asylum began experimenting with new treatments for mental illness, such as insulin shock therapy. However, these procedures were often performed without proper medical oversight and resulted in the deaths of several patients. In 1992, the asylum was finally closed. Numbered those. Eastern State Penitentiary. Eastern State Penitentiary was a prison in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania that operated from 1829 to 1913. At the time of its construction, the prison was considered to be a model institution with separate cells for each inmate and a focus on rehabilitation. However, the prison's solitary confinement practices quickly led to a decline in the mental health of many inmates. In the late 19th century, the prison began to experiment with new forms of punishment, such as the use of padded cells and restraints. These practices only made the prison more brutal and led to a number of inmate deaths. No. 1. Wisconsin State Hospital. The Wisconsin State Hospital in Madison, Wisconsin was a mental hospital that operated from 1848 to 1984. Throughout its history, the hospital was plagued by overcrowding, understaffing, and allegations of patient abuse. In the early 1900s, the hospital began experimenting with new treatments for mental illness, such as electroconvulsive therapy. However, these procedures were often performed without proper medical oversight and resulted in the deaths of several patients. In 1984, the hospital was finally closed and the building was demolished. Thank you for watching. Which of these abandoned mental hospitals scared you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're there, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my videos. I'll see you next time.